Okay, all right. So, Uranus is one of the outer planets, and as a result of that, it moves relatively slowly. Takes about 84 years to go around through all the signs of the zodiac, and so it's just going into Gemini on the 7th of July. I think that's Monday, isn't it? And it'll be there until May 2033, 8 years. And that's because 8/12s, that's the Uranus cycle. And so what we're talking about, the entry is the beginning of an 8-year phase that's humanity's going through. I think people who have Uranus in Gemini were probably born in the late 40s, maybe. I don't think it was the early 50s. I think it was the late 40s. Okay, all right. So this is the chart, and I've just cast this one here for Washington on the 7th of July. That's Monday, and I'll just find my little pointer and show you. No, that's not the one, Shonda. That's the one. So there's Uranus there, sitting in Naught, 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 Gemini. So one of the most, and so from Washington's perspective, it gives a Gemini rising, and it puts Uranus in the 12th house. Now, of course, different places on Earth, Uranus will be in different parts of the circle. But I do find that a little interesting in that the 12th house has got a great deal to do with secrets, whether that's your enemies or aspects of yourself you're not really in touch with, or things that you've buried or consciously working behind the scenes. And it's also a very karmic position. So Uranus is a planet that brings great light, and it's gone into one of the what we'd call the darkest parts of the chart. So one would hope that a great deal of light would be shown upon the things, certainly in America, that have previously been hidden or in the background where ordinary people can't see them. The other thing that's very important about Uranus's entry into Gemini is that it's sitting very close to Venus. Now, Venus loves being in Gemini on a soul level, and the reason for that is that Venus is the esoteric ruler of Gemini, and that's simple. And that's the fifth ray of love in action, or divine truth. And so when Venus is in Gemini, right on top of Uranus, there's a fairly strong message on a soul level that we need to find the higher truth rather than what we think is truth, what we've been told is truth, whether that's in the media, in the newspapers, or whether we've deluded ourselves. But it's an opportunity to have great breakthroughs when we realise things on a higher and a clearer level. And for the Americans, it being in the 12th house, hopefully there will be things brought to light that previously have been buried. Now, who knows what they might be, but there could be all kinds of revelations between now and 2033 where things are brought to light. Now, Gemini is the sign of the twins, and it's very dualistic in nature. And from an esoteric perspective, when Venus is in Gemini, the purpose of Venus in Gemini is to bridge the head, the brow chakra, and the heart. And in esoteric terms, you would say that's about building the Antakarana and being able to recognize which thoughts or voices or messages are coming from the ego, and which ones are coming from the higher self through the heart on an intuitive level. So these years ahead, what do we say, the next 8 years, we have an opportunity for humanity to forge ahead spiritually and build this bridge, the Antakarana. But it requires discrimination, and it requires a unity. Now, on an ordinary worldly level, Gemini tends to separate, whereas when Venus is in Gemini, it says rise up above them and look at things through the heart from that higher perspective. Now, if I had cast the chart for Israel, and I haven't, Uranus would have been in the 9th house. And so therefore the transformational change of the light bearer Uranus would be in international relations. And we can certainly see at the moment that Israel's become a pariah on the world stage, not to all nations, but because it's been acting, you know, as a rogue nation. And so the spotlight is on Israel, I would say, over the next X amount of years, as Uranus is going through Gemini, to say, well, how's it going to behave and with regard to the international community. There's more I could say about the chart, but for the moment, I'll come back to this chart as we go through the talk. But I'll just leave that for the moment and continue on. Now, astrologically, we have different movements. You might hear people talk about a planet being direct, and direct simply means going in forward movement. So Uranus is going in a forward movement from Monday for a couple of months until the beginning of September. And then it goes retrograde. Apparently it goes backwards, which is a period of reflection. And that's for a few months. I think it's until February 2026. So things that are inaugurated or brought into light will proceed over the next couple of months. So what we can do with that is set our intentions for strengthening our intuition, wise decision making, finding unity, and bringing greater light and clarity according to where the Gemini is in your chart, and know that hopefully there would be a lot of progress in those areas over the next 2 months. As I mentioned, the fifth ray is about love in action. And, you know, spirituality is different things for different people. But spirituality, according to the fifth ray, is about whatever your philosophies or your highest ideals are. You have to say, well, am I walking the talk? Am I living those principles that I aspire to? Have I found a way of bridging my intuitive higher mind with the compassionate heart? Am I thinking more in terms of wholeness or oneness rather than separation or right or wrong or good or bad or friends or enemies? Because this is what Venus in Gemini, which is where it is at the moment, is trying to get all of us to do, is to think in terms of a synergistic whole or one, because that then attracts the light of the soul, and that light of the soul is then thrown on the path ahead. So the more you're able to walk your talk, live your principles, find your compassion, and refuse to make judgment calls from the rational mind, the more light will be thrown upon the path ahead. So you'll be able to make sense of your life and see where you're going. And that's because truth and love get held aloft when Venus is in Gemini. So that's the aspiration for all of us, is this unification with the heart, allegiance to the higher self. And according to where you are on the path, you may be someone who's just trying to find a meditation practice that works for you, a spiritual practice that works for you. You may be someone who's looking for a group, a network. Where are the people that think as you do? Where are the people that can help you stay on the straight and narrow, so to speak? Or it may be that you want to contribute in some work of service to help make the world a better place. But they're the sorts of things that we're really meant to be focusing upon over these years to come. And in order to do that, we have to let go or surrender something. And often what we have to let go or surrender is the idea that we know things, because Uranus is going to reveal things. The things that we've considered the norm, we might find that there are new revelations, about ourselves, our relationships, about all kinds of things. I love this quote, this Rumi quote that says, "I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God." This is as above, so below. This is the God immanent and the God transcendent, the God within and the God everywhere. I've put this picture here of the Tuileries, the garden, beautiful, beautiful garden. I think it was inaugurated by, I did look it up, I think it was, no, it's not Catherine the Great, it was someone else. I've forgotten the name of the woman, one of the de Medici people, some centuries ago. Beautiful, beautiful gardens in the centre of Paris. And the reason I've put it there is because Venus falls in the 3rd degree of Gemini, which talks about the Tuileries. And so I wonder whether something may come out of France, Paris, that can help us all. Now, the Parisians and France has very strong 5th ray and very strong 3rd ray. So at the moment, I'm not seeing much evidence in terms of world politics of compassionate decisions coming out of France. But I wonder whether there will be some in these weeks and months ahead. Okay. And of course, not everybody receives the impulses of the soul, but those who are searching, they do. So there are parts of this Uranus entering Gemini chart that form a pattern called a cradle. And I do remember talking about this some months ago, and I'll just find my little pointer again and show you. So there's the Venus-Uranus conjunction. And what I want you to notice is the 2 blue lines that go across that way, the 2 trines, and the green lines with the stars on them that link them up. And this whole pattern forms a cradle or a bowl. And it's an extremely supportive astrological pattern that means that spiritual people on the spiritual path or people of a spiritual orientation need to reach out and share. And it's almost like, you know, the sum of the whole is greater than the individual parts. It's a fire and air cradle because it's going from Gemini, Venus and Uranus, through the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, through Pluto in Aquarius, and down here to the moon in Sagittarius. So the message, and the fire and air cradle, is about sharing ideas and sharing inspiration and sharing actions and sharing communication. And one of the best things about the 21st century is that we have at our fingertips. We can talk to people all around the planet. We can listen to different people speaking on a variety of subjects all around through the World Wide Web. So it's extremely easy to access through the fire air cradle the information, the ideas, the groups, the networks. And in order to do this, we need to let go of something. Pluto's involved. So for some people, they like just to meet in person, or other people would say, well, I'm not really a group person. You know, we have to let go of whatever our obstacles are. And then Saturn and Neptune in Aries says, well, it's a bit like the group needs to unite. We can't do things on our own. The potency of group work is far, far stronger than anything that I might do individually or you might do individually. And the reason for this is that we're in the Aquarian age, and the spiritual hierarchy of Earth prefer to send downflows of light into groups. Okay, other things that I thought I would talk about is here on the 7th of July, the Sun is in the cross quarters position. That's the middle degree, the 15th degree of Cancer, and the Earth is the 15th degree of Capricorn. Now those cross quarters positions, and I should say that the cardinal signs have a very strong connection to the spiritual hierarchy. And the fixed star Sirius sits here, about 14.5 Cancer it is, and directly opposite is the fixed star Vega. And so both of those, and Vega is associated with spiritual responsibility and personal responsibility, and Sirius has a great deal to do with hope when times are tough or difficult. And so there's a message as Uranus enters Gemini to the disciples and the aspirants of the world that says, unite, inspire each other, come together for the greater good, radiate and send out hope. Whenever something looks difficult, always look for the silver lining, because it'll be there somewhere. Share hope, especially for people who don't know what's going on, who are confused, and take spiritual responsibility. That's the Vega. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to continue. Yeah, that's the cradle I was talking about, where we have to choose unity over separation, choose tolerance over judgment, compassion over fear, and that's the way that we grow collectively. and we strengthen the light of whatever groups that we're in. And look, it doesn't have to be a spiritual group. It could be that you're providing great comfort to a family member through a family group, or it could be a yoga group, or it could be a political group, or it could be a gardening group. But groups are really important for networking and for sharing hope. Okay, that Cancer Capricorn cross quarters that I was talking about, I just pointed it out to you there. Now, I've got to put something sticky on my glasses. 1 second. So for those who are on a spiritual path, who would respond to both Sirius and Vega, we have to say, are we taking the necessary personal responsibility, and am I sharing hope? But the other things that's happening is that there's another pattern, and I'll show it to you here. You see this little dotted red line? That's what we call a semi-square, and it goes from Venus to the Sun. And then there's another one, dotted red line, that goes across to the Earth. So this is the pattern called the sesquiquadrate, that's that one. The opposition, that's the brown one, and the semi-square, an SOS. Now, in ordinary worldly terms, when someone sends out an SOS, you know that we need help. Someone needs help. So there's a message that's strobing out through this Uranus entry into Gemini that says humanity needs help from those who are a few steps ahead of them on the path, from the higher aspirants, from the disciples. We have to look over our shoulders and say, who is it around me that I can help, because they're confused, they've gone down a dead end, they think there's no purpose, they can't find hope, or they don't recognise, they can't discriminate. Yeah, because the issue is to try and activate this practical aspect of Gemini, which is the dissemination of higher wisdom, and to get beyond any obstacles to do with the lack of hope or a lack of personal responsibility. That's the SOS, that's the help message that's going out, because a lot of people are lost or confused. And so those who, and every one of us may consider that, well, how can I help? I don't know much, but every single person has life experience that they can share with others. Yeah? They may be family members, strangers, because all of us are in a living chain. So look to see who it is you can help. The other thing that's in this chart that I've mentioned there is Jupiter square Neptune. So there's Jupiter sitting in the 7th degree of Cancer, and there's Neptune up there in 2 degrees of Aries. Now, and Jupiter loves being in Cancer, and it's like a grandmother's hug. You know, it's a warm, embracing, collective, nurturing energy. And it's got a great deal to do with the Holy Mothers of Earth, the Divine Holy Mothers. It's got a great deal to do with anyone who feels that they have a role to play in nurturing of the group. And yet the square to Neptune brings confusion. So it's hard to know. Some people may feel, well, I'll look after my little group and I'll make the others, the externals, you know, the black people, the people of a different religion, the people in China, the people in Russia, I'll make them the enemy. And the downside of the sign of Cancer is it's very clannish or very nationalistic. It just kind of wants to hold and comfort and love only those that are the same. And so the difficulty, I think, of the Jupiter-Neptune is an ignorance where we fail to recognise that we're one humanity. And so it's extremely important to listen to, if you're listening to, talks on the political, what's going on in the world politically, listen to things that previously haven't. Listen to someone from India or someone from Iran or someone from Russia. Widen your perspective so you don't fall into the narrow, clannish, I want to stay safe, because the downside of Cancer, it's like the crab, you know, and if you try and sneak up on a crab, it'll just pull its legs in, hide in its shell and wait for you to go away. And if we all do that, then we make everything so much worse on the planet at the moment. Okay, I shall continue on. Now, not many people may not know of Vega, but Vega's a fixed star. And my astrology program had this to say about it. It said, and I've got it covered up so I can't quite read it. It says, whether we see this star as symbolising the charisma and magic of Orpheus's lyre, as a harp from the Greek tradition, or as the sacred and charismatic Egyptian goddess Maat, who is associated with karma, this star is truly magical. If strong in a chart, and it's strong in this Uranus chart because the Earth's on top of it, and the Earth is associated with the Dharma. So the Dharma for humans on Earth at the moment, it's got something to do with karma, something to do with the magic of the harp, which we often think about as being very soothing music. Now, it can be seen as beautiful, artistic, or very good for oration, but it can also be charm put to a negative use, as in a charismatic dictator. Well, we certainly, if you put that in the modern lingo, we've got plenty of people who would like to be the those that are running the show on the planet, and plenty of them with what we call, who was it? Someone from the 60s sang a song about the silver-tongued devils. We have plenty of those charismatic dictators with the silver-tongued devils. But I think that the focus of Vega is to do with this taking spiritual responsibility, sending energy of calm and hope out, and being very mindful that we're in a very karmic position on Earth. Yeah, now if you look at Ananda Tarasham's fantastic meditation book, The 17 Steps to Perfection, there's a meditation there, and this is Cygnus. There's the fixed star Vega, and it's not far from Cygnus, the Swan constellation. I think it's a second magnitude, very bright star. But if you want to tune in more to Vega, then you can work with the meditation on Vega. And what it does, it helps one to broaden your consciousness beyond the personal, beyond the group, beyond and beyond and beyond. And it builds into one's psyche, soul responsibility and brotherliness or brother sisterliness. So I really recommend that meditation book. That's where the Earth is, the Dharma. And then, as I said, the Sun on Monday is right on top of Sirius, the star of eternal hope, middle degrees of Cancer in the cross quarters. And the meditation for Sirius is about total recognition. You know, all of us, you know, the world's a big place, the universe is even bigger. We just see one little portion of it. There's something about meditation on the beautiful blue star Sirius that will help us tune into the authentic. And it'll also assist us in patience and building of right action. I have the link to where you can get this book at the end of the slideshow. And of course, the Egyptian. So there's an Egyptian message twice there. Vega's got a connection to karma in ancient Egypt, and Sirius was sacred to the Egyptians. And that SOS, that help pattern that I was talking about. Now, the semi-square, the way the help pattern works is the semi-square means we tend to get stuck in personal habits, whatever they are. And the sesquiquadrate, the long dotted red line in the chart, means we end up in power struggles. So this pattern's going on between the Sun in Cancer, the Earth in Capricorn, and Uranus. And we can either have breakthroughs of our old habits or our power patterns, yeah, or we can slide backwards, excuse me, and become quite entrenched in our habits and the old power games. And we see this happening all over the planet on a political level. The power struggles, the projection, they're the problem, they started the war. And if people retreat to their own nationalistic corners and feed their old habits and keep projecting the power issues onto others, well, then nothing happens. Some months ago, I found something and I've forgotten. Apparently the game that we play in the West, which we call the snakes and ladders, has a very ancient Arabic origin. And I feel that there's something about this SOS that says, well, if we tune into the heart, if we work for service, find our spiritual groups, use our spiritual practices, we can go up the ladders. But if we fall into the SOS pattern and get stuck in our old habits or power struggles or blame, and we slide down the snakes. Yeah, and of course, we see a lot of the shadow self happening on the world stage. We see the language of hate everywhere. We esoterically, we know that we're in a period of accelerated purification and the shadow is rising. And we have to be very, very mindful that the national shadows are being thrown about. And we need to transform. You know, Scorpio's got that connection to the snakes, and it's got that energy of transformation. Okay, here's the chart again. And another thing I wanted to point out to you was the position of Vulcan. There it is. Vulcan's in the 23rd degree of Cancer. Now, there's another fixed star. I don't know how bright Pollux is. In terms of the sign Gemini, the sign of the twins, there are two stars that are very, very close together, and one's called Castor and one's called Pollux. And it must be a couple of thousand years ago they were in the sign of Gemini, and now because of the precession of the equinox, they're up here in this sort of third decan of Cancer. And Vulcan is right on top of Pollux, and Pollux was one of the twins that became immortalized, and there's a mythology associated with it, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the planet Vulcan is to do with spiritual purification. Yeah, you see, it's a downward pointing arrow. It's a planet that's associated with the getting rid of personal will and finding and aligning to our highest will. Think of it as the highest principles, the things that we know within ourselves that we must adhere to. And Vulcan is trying to purify nationalistic tendencies for humanity. And there's a square from Vulcan up to Chiron, which says that if we all try and look after number one and get stuck in our nationalistic tendencies, then nothing gets purified. And it's like spinning your wheels if you've dug the wheels of your car into mud. And because Vulcan's on top of Pollux, which is associated with this sort of this mythology. So the mythology of Castor and Pollux was that they were twins and they'd gone out on a sea voyage as part of the Argonauts, and something happened and Castor was killed and immortalized. I beg your pardon, I told you Pollux was immortalized, but it was Castor who was immortalized. And then his twin brother was struck with grief, and he petitioned Zeus, that's Jupiter, and said, "Swap, look, I want to look, I'd rather give my life to my brother." And the teaching around Castor and Pollux is that we have a light and a dark, we have a personality and we have a soul, we have different races, different nations, but essentially we are meant to walk a mile in each other's shoes and relate to each other as brothers and sisters. And Vulcan, sitting right on top of Pollux, is asking for some kind of personal sacrifice so that we can recognize who are our brothers and sisters that we need to form allegiance with. Yes, and there's a great, it's very heartening to see that all across social media there's a great amount of outcry and people saying, well, I'm a Gaza and I'm a Palestinian, because in truth we are. And whether we unite or whether we separate, we're at a period where we can potentially make enormous global karma. And it's been difficult to watch what's happened in Gaza and to watch a lot of the Arab nations, the neighbours, the brothers, the sisters, being silent. Same things happened in Iran. They haven't really spoken up because of national interests, because of fear, what have you. The Americans, the English, the Germans, the French, other European nations have been either silent or complicit in the war crimes against Ukraine, against Gaza, against Iran. They've been funding and sending weapons to Israel. And I heard just today that there were more than 200 journalists had been murdered by the Israeli Defense Forces for trying to report the truth and speak the truth. And of course, journalism is a Gemini profession. You know, you follow the story. But of course, there's a lot of misinformation and not enough of the higher vibration of what's really going on. So we have to remember that we are one humanity, one global brother sisterhood through this next 8-year period, and whatever harm is done to our brothers or sisters is done to us. And we have to learn to walk a mile in their shoes and find ways we can unite or stand in soul strength. And how you do that might be different to how I do it, but this is the task for us, to refuse to separate and to refuse to judge and make something right and something wrong. This next section I've entitled The Fire of the Gods, and the reason why I've called it The Fire of the Gods is because Vulcan has got a great deal to do with fire. In the ancient Greek mythology, Vulcan is the god of fire. And when I was looking at the Vulcan, I sort of remembered the myth of Prometheus, you know, and how Zeus, the god Zeus, was tricked by Titan, one of the Titans, Prometheus, and therefore Zeus said, no, humanity can't have the fire. And Prometheus went, well, to hell with that. And he went and stole fire, stole the spiritual energy and gave it to humanity. And so the mythology of Zeus and Prometheus is to do with, you know, spiritual fire or worldly fire. On a practical level, worldly fire can be war. Yeah? On a higher level, it's inspiration, it's love, it's compassion, it's spiritual principles. And there's something about Vulcan that is asking us to lift into those higher energies of spirituality. Yes, and what happened, you know, as punishment to humanity, because Prometheus had stolen the fire, Hephaestus, that's also another name for Vulcan, forged Pandora. Now, most people have heard of Pandora, and I think it's the Greeks who say, well, or maybe it was earlier than that, they say she was the first woman. I'm not sure that that's true. I think other mythologies go further back. Now, it took Vulcan quite a while to forge a living, out of fire, a living human being, which was called Pandora, and all the gods and goddesses gave Pandora various gifts. And then she was sent down, and she ended up marrying the brother of Prometheus, and that is Epimetheus. And of course, if you've heard the story of Pandora, there was a box that she was given, and she was told she was never to look inside it. But of course, I think it was Venus who'd given her curiosity, and she couldn't help herself. And she opened the box, or I think it was a jar in some of the stories, because her curiosity overcame her, and she struggled with her conscience. She'd been told, don't lift the lid, and she released evil or suffering or disease or plague. And I think that's what's happening, you know. Vulcan, that's the fire. Vulcan, who forged Pandora, is right on top of Venus, saying, okay, well, look what you've done, humanity. You've released evil, you've released suffering, you've released disease. And right at the bottom of the box and at the end of the mythology, Pandora, out comes the beautiful Deva, hope. And so there's that theme of hope that's connected to Sirius. So we have to recognize that the evils that we've created, maybe for the last few thousand years, are being released for purification, and not forget about hope. Yes, and when we utilize, and incidentally, you can meditate upon Vulcan in that fantastic book, The 17 Steps to Perfection, and it will strengthen your will to good, and you may then be given assistance to transform parts of your personality, transmute some of your emotions, or even transfigure some of your old belief systems. But if we don't respond to the higher vibration of Vulcan, then what happens is that we're playing with the fire of the gods, and we're creating war, or in the modern lingo in 2025, cyber war, dreadful, horrific. And of course, since 1945, when we played with the fire of the gods, now there's a battle going on for who has and who holds and who can control power through the atomic bomb. So I just wanted to mention that mythology because I think it's very intrinsically tied up with what's going on Earth at the moment. Yes, and of course in the last couple of weeks we've had so many voices all screaming and yelling with different versions of the truth. I'm inclined to think that we've had a great deal of political theatrics going on to try and set the agenda, set the narrative, and then control the story. It's what politicians do to try and get out in front of a story and tell a lie over and over and over enough until it's believed. Incidentally, Saturn, when Uranus goes into Gemini on Monday, is in the 2nd degree of Aries. And the Sabian symbol for that is a comedian entertaining the group. Now, I don't know. It's probably disingenuous to say, well, is that Donald Trump? There's certainly been a lot of posturing and political grandstanding and chest thumping, but I don't think Trump would be the only one. You know, so I'm thinking the politicians are trying to entertain the masses, but meanwhile, we're creating karma. You know, Europe's been silent. Western democracies have been silent. The Geneva Convention has been trashed. The United Nations and the nuclear treaty articles have been ignored. The body set to investigate and make sure that everybody plays by the rules with nuclear weapons has been complicit in the war plans between Israel and America. So there's been a complete violation because of power, because of greed, all kinds of things. European collaboration, NATO planning more war against Russia, trying to extract more money out of the West. I know Australia's even offering to send troops. I know the Danes have just, in the last few days, extended conscription to women over 18. So one part of the planet or some of the political leaders are just beating the drum of war. So we have to work with the energy of hope and spiritual responsibility. Yes, and they're implementing this horrible, horrible thing called the Abraham Shield Plan, and there's a link there to that. I don't think I've got time to tell you much about that. But we are seeing ethnic cleansing. Yes, we are seeing the annihilation of what was once the Holy Land that is no longer holy for means to do with power and control and nationalistic interest. Yes, that Abraham Accord. I discovered that we know that wars are being fought by proxies. You know, Ukraine's running the war for America. Yeah, Israel's running a war on behalf of itself, and one would say European nations and Americans, and they are using artificial intelligence. Now, this is war by algorithms and war by artificial intelligence that's built into the drones and the missiles, and it guides the bombers. We have that as well as all the lies in the media, the psyops and the surveillance that's going on. I didn't know of the program called Lavender, which the Israeli Defense Force designed and started using, I think it was 2023. And the program Lavender is using AI to identify which people are likely to be dissidents, which Palestinians we want to kill, where do they live, you know, what social networks do they use, how do we find them? So it's following people in order to kill them. That's what the Israeli Defense Force have been using for two and a half years, something like that. And then they've developed another program called Gospel. And this is a program that uses the artificial intelligence to destroy buildings and neighborhoods. And of course, they've used this in the Iran war to annihilate the scientists and buildings. And they also have back doors. If you've ever had anything on your computer hacked, you'd understand what a backdoor program can do. You know, if you download something on your computer that shouldn't be there, you may lose your whole computer, or they might hack into your bank or take identity theft. So we're having backdoor takeovers of the military, and the Israeli Defense Force are at the forefront of this. you know, using the technology to come in the back door and hijack the military capability of who they consider to be the enemies. Unbelievably evil. This combination of the low vibration fifth ray, that's the technology, with war. Unbelievable. And of course, the casualty is truth, that has been corralled and held captive by the highest bidder. I think Trump offered 30 billion pieces of silver, probably the US currency, to Iran. He thinks that, okay, we've had a 12-day war and now we'd like your resources, please, because ultimately it's about resources and land and power and oil and gas. That's what the wars are all about. Cyberspace war. So that's what we're in the middle of. That's what we're witnessing. Oh, there it is. I said 2023. It's 2021. It's when they first started bringing in the AI technology. And I mean, AI became a bit more common parlance 2024 for ordinary people, but the military always develop it and use it several years ahead before it hits the sort of the public market. So this is the CIA, this is Mossad, this is the MI5. 2023, they've been doing this in Gaza, 2025 in Iran. I'm having difficulty thinking that they'll stop because they think they're on a winner, they think they're ahead of it. And it's not just those ones I've mentioned. India's up to their eyeballs in this because they've had global software dominance, and therefore the Americans, the Israelis, they've been utilising the Indian software and programs like Google Maps or Starlink or the drones. This is war like we have never, ever seen it before. Yes, and it's been happening in Iran. And as I said, the nuclear watchdog's been compromised, and they're taking control of the enemy's devices. I heard a term called autonomous AI, and I can't remember where I saw it, but apparently there's two types of AI. There's the AI where the artificial intelligence makes a plan of strategy or attack, and then a human comes in and oversees it and verifies it. And then there's autonomous AI, where the AI has no human oversight. So that's what they're doing. The programs that are embedded, there's a typo there with backdoors. And in real time, anything that, you know, with the AI technology is extremely fast. And so this completely changes. And the targets are not just war. The targets are also the personal information, civil registries, passports, any airport that you go into. In any of these countries, you know, you're being observed by the AI as well as the military. So it's chilling, absolutely chilling, where the AI is going and whose hands it's in control of. The Gulf states are all using it: the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Egypt. And of course, anyone who goes into any of the Middle Eastern countries, and I would have to say also anyone who travels into America or into any parts of Europe, this AI stuff will be embedded into the passports, just in case you happen to be a dissident. There's the link if you're interested in that horrific way surveillance is going. And of course, I'm running out of time here. I've got about another quarter of an hour, I think. Okay, I thought I'd have a look at Benjamin Netanyahu's chart. And the reason I decided to have a look at this was because he was supposed to be in The Hague facing the International Criminal Court for various, I don't know, there's a list of misdemeanors as long as your arm, and some of them are minor, and some of them are corruption, and some of them are to do with money, and some of them are to do with genocide. Anyway, he was supposed to be in The Hague this week, but he's asked for a free pass. He said, no, I'm too busy running the war. I can't come to The Hague. this week. And then I think Donald Trump has been trying to petition to get him out of the criminal court, says he shouldn't be heard. And then I think Netanyahu's going to America next week. So I don't know when he's actually going to turn up in The Hague to begin to face some of the things that are going on. So I was having a bit of a look at his chart, and I decided that I'd look at his solar return chart. And that's either 20th of October, so it'll either be that day or a day either side. It'll be his birthday in October, because the energy in the solar return chart will show us what sort of a year ahead he's likely to have. Okay, so I've just got a few points I wanted to talk about here, if I can find my little spotlight again. So on his birthday, the moon's very close to the sun, but it's behind the sun. We refer to that as the balsamic moon phase, and it's an integration karmic phase, one of the phases of the moon. So on some level, there may be things that are foreshadowed in Netanyahu's life that don't necessarily come to pass from 2025 to 2026, but they're sitting in the background. And I know that the International Criminal Court take 3 or 4 years before they get to the end of the list of things, or maybe that's the beginning of the list of some of the major war crimes. But some of those issues are being put on his karmic record, I would say. Other things to notice is Pluto, the non-sacred planet Pluto, that's to do with the shadow, is sitting in the international house, the 9th house. And as I said earlier on, when I'd looked at the Uranus chart entry into Gemini, I noticed that the planet Uranus was in the 9th house. So I'm certainly hoping that some of Israel's previous allies will just turn their backs and walk away because of the genocide. It hasn't happened yet, but if he keeps it up, hopefully he will become an international pariah on the world stage. There is a cardinal grand cross, which means that he will fight very, very hard in order to clear his name or to prove that somehow or other his actions have been just. It's very hard to know. I would pray and hope that with this cardinal grand cross, at least some of the crimes that he's to be held accountable for. And of course, it's not just Netanyahu. There are other people going to the International Criminal Court. But I would hope that there would be some traction or some progress in the 12 months from October 2025 through till October 2026. The planet Uranus in his chart, there's the dotted red line there. So there are power plays going on in order to free. It sort of reminds me a bit of the Houdini act, to try and, you see Houdini and they put him in the tank of water and he's got, 3 minutes to get the locks off of him and try and get out before he dies. I think Netanyahu will try and pull a Houdini with that Uranus sesquiquadrate to the moon. And then we have Mars. What is it? Mars is square Mercury. Where's the Mercury? Oh, Mars and Mercury together square the midheaven in his chart. So the Mars is in the degree of ambition, and so is Mercury. So his ambition, his goal for greater Israel, his goal to prove dominance and to suppress all of his neighbours, won't give up without a fight. Yes, so there's a fight to the death going on. Yeah, I'm quietly hopeful that he will be held to account for some of his crimes, and I'm hoping that he can't pull a Houdini and somehow or other wipe the slate clean. It's very hard to say. We've got Gemini rising for the year, so there'll be double speak. He'll be swearing that black is white and that he's the good guy and he's the persecuted one. Yes. And then I've done this last brief chart here, which I've just entitled Karma Calling. Now, I was looking at his chart trying to see, is there any time in the not too distant future where he will be held to account. And around the outside, let me find the little dot again. Sorry. Around the outside circle, so that's Netanyahu's chart on the inside, and the outside circle is where the planets are moving through. And on the 19th of November, and I've cast this outer one for The Hague, I'm hoping that some of Netanyahu's chickens will come home to roost. And the reason for that is that there are 4 planets in Scorpio, and they're all in his 12th house. And one of them is to do with, 2 of them are to do with cruelty. One of them's to do with ambition. I think I said he had ambition in the other chart, but in actual fact it's ambition and also pride. And here in the 15th degree of Scorpio, matters to do with great harm and hatred. So I'm hoping that there's some kind of karmic recognition, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm hoping his chickens come home to roost, and that he's held to account karmically for what he and his government have done. The transiting south node is right on top of his Saturn. See number 15.5 there, and 15.5 Virgo. So there's something extremely karmic going on for him by the 3rd week of November. And the destiny point, the north node and Saturn, are right around the IC, which is a point, the 4th house cusp has got a very strong connection into the spiritual realms. So it seems to me that the Board of Karma will have something to say, and that there will be notations made, and whether he has to pay for them in this life or in future lives, that's for the Board of Karma. But I think there's some kind of a karmic reckoning going on, and I'm hoping that that second half of November. Not other things that are happening is there's the planet Vulcan, pretty close to his ascendant. There's Mars right on his ascendant. So, you know, his personality, his ego will consider there's a fight for the death, but I'm certainly hoping that there'll be some kind of karmic reckoning of the absolute atrocities that he's almost single-handedly engineered. Yes. Talked about the puppet masters a week or 2 ago, and I just wanted to just briefly mention them again. Remember I told you that Fidel Castro said that to install a world government that knows no borders and is not accountable to anyone but itself, you know, that's the danger of a one world government that's being set up by the billionaires. But what I wanted to mention to you was this diagram that I showed you a couple of weeks ago to do with the puppet masters. You know, if you're an esoteric student, you may have seen a triangular diagram that looks a little bit like that has humanity down the bottom and the disciples or the spiritual aspirants in the middle and the holy ones up the top. So really what we have here is a mirror image of the spiritual hierarchy. It's actually a diagram of what we would refer to as the Dark Brotherhood. Yeah, and anyone who thinks that it's going to give up without a fight is very, very strongly mistaken. And it's important to know thy enemy, and to, you know, if you're trying to purify yourself and be the best version of yourself, you have to take a long, hard look in the mirror and see what your shadow's doing and how your personality, your ego's acting up. And similarly, if we want to understand what's happening on the planet, we need to understand in broad brushstrokes who the Dark Brotherhood are. And their task and their purpose is world control, world domination, money, power and sex, and they misuse the mind, and they are misusing technology. And it reminds me of the reason why Atlantis went down. But of course, that's another story entirely. Uranus goes retrograde, which is a period for review and reflection and a time to revise things from the 5th of September till the 5th of February. That's from springtime here in the Southern Hemisphere till early February next year. So on a soul level, we can use that to to deeply reflect upon our lives. How well am I going? How are my networks? Am I getting the support? Am I having the healings that I need? But I would imagine that the global elite, who are the puppet masters for the Dark Brotherhood, will also be doing their review, and they'll be doing a sort of a reworking of their plan. So I don't know, but I wonder whether there'll be the next stage of whatever NATO's doing, or the next stage of this very evil plans that Israel's, the Zionists have for domination of Greater Egypt, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, Iran, West Bank. That's already happening. Yes, but we can't pay too much attention to what they do. We have to say, let's use that period from early September to early February to unite with peace and to resist and to call out the lies that are happening. Because, of course, you know, Mars is in Virgo, and we have to pay attention to the small details, and we have to choose. Do we want spiritual purification or physical war? We have to live simply so others can simply live. You know, I mean, the people in Gaza are being bombed when they try and find food. We have to make peace with our shadow. We have to find everyone that we have something in common with and unite with them. And you can do that very easily through social media. You can do it through your community, your neighborhood, and refrain from projecting our shadow, our darkness, because when we do that, we diminish ourselves, our nations, humanity, and the earth. So it's not a pleasant topic, but we need to know what's going on, know that the puppet masters, the Dark Brotherhood, are working with their plan, and that we have to find the allegiance to work with the plan of the Holy Ones, because they need us now more than ever. There's the links. You see this one here, it comes from West Point. And I was reading the article there, and they're talking with great glee. This is the American military complex, about how wonderful the AI is for war. And towards the end of the article, they talk about, oh yes, but there's a few mistakes it can make. It's not infallible. There's the link to the 17 Steps of Perfection.